Alrighty, it's Wednesday, March 21st, 2012, and it's time for Comments X. Well, we've increased our news format. We're now up to an hour in length for the news at night. We have an enormous amount of content to get through, so that's the reason why it's increased. Our documentary series, the reference document series, is out. So you can watch that as well. And today looks like it's going to be a day of filming again, as I try to work on some more documentaries. So I'm going to try to look at some of the editing stuff I have to do and sort of fix up the kinks there, and fix up some of my my recording studios. Other than that, hard to remember what to say. Well, for the books, if you're a book person, if you're, this is for the booktubes and the book vlogs, the book hauls. If you're a reader you're on YouTube, this is kind of going to be the next step. Is if you're interested in this, is going from books to libraries, and this is the documentary series that's going to be developing next. And you'll see bits of it here, but it's going to be developed on another channel called Bass Institute, and you can follow it there. And you can see a lot. We'll talk. Comment X here will be where we'll be talking about the books and everything like that. I started off the way most young people started off, with fictional books. I used to love being in the library. I liked sort of picking up books, and that was actually my favorite part of school. I didn't do that well in school. I really didn't like being in class. I would have preferred it if I could stay home and read, or be in the library and read. That was sort of my preference. I don't know, I guess I didn't really get along too well with many of the kids in class, so I simply preferred to be by myself. I mean, even at certain times, because I don't know what it was, I didn't know how to interact with people that well. So I spent most of my time reading. It wasn't until much later on, so basically till after high school, that I began touring around different used bookstores. And at this time I was doing puzzles. For my amusement, and trying to think of new things to do. I was also doing my undergraduate in astrophysics. So in between my studying, to keep myself active, my usual fun was the reading, going to bookstores, and doing my puzzles. What ended up happening is I don't know how I sort of stumbled into it. I started reading some of the nonfiction rather than reading fiction books. I stumbled into the nonfiction section. Normally I would have avoided the nonfiction section in the library, but for some reason I started looking at some of the stuff I would find at some of these used bookstores, particularly some of the older books, and all of a sudden the nonfiction became a lot more exciting than the fiction, because I realized that you could sort of go around with the nonfiction, and you could figure out what happened in history from a different perspective. Like when you read a history book, you're reading somebody's interpretation of history. And I remember one time looking through an old, these are rejected books from the library, and this were old. It was a bound old periodical. It was a whole bunch of what was newspapers, all bound together into a book. And the passage I was reading was about the Civil War. And rather than being written by a guy who was reviewing about the Civil War. Like, that's the way history is a history professor or someone who knows history writes a book about the stuff he's read about the Civil War. He's never experienced it. But this was written by a reporter inside, or a person inside of the Civil War. And this book was from the period of the Civil War. And when I was reading it, it was unbelievable. The detail that was in there that is not in history books just really sort of changed the perspective. And so what I did is I began looking around bookstores for older books. I'm talking about the used bookstores, to see what I could pick up in terms of these old books, to see what they said, because I started realizing that a lot of old books have things in them that are not necessarily have changed since then. The thoughts and ideas, the way people thought, have changed. And one of the things I used to do, and this is where I started off a while ago, is I have a collection of dictionaries. This is an old one. This is part of my my antique book collection. This is an old dictionary here, and you can see that it's from Webster's. And one of the things I did, I don't know, it was a bizarre behavior, is that I used to like sitting and reading the dictionary. So as I started sitting and reading the dictionary here, these older ones, I began seeing differences in how words were used over a period of time. So basically every decade there seems to be a shift in how words were used. And as I went to see how words were used today, you could see there was a definite shift. And so I realized that collecting old dictionaries was actually a value, and I was able to pick up some old encyclopedias, some old things about science, some old science textbooks. I mean, these were really old books. They were pre 1960s. Actually, even into the 1800s. I even have one. I sort of saw one in one of the libraries. I wasn't able to buy it. Someone had it on display, and if someone has books on display in a store, old books, I go over and I'll go into the store just to read the books, not to sort of do anything else, but just simply read the books. And what I found was that some of the books that they have in the stores are actually pretty good, because they'll have old encyclopedias. They'll have, I saw the first collection. It was an encyclopedia edition of Scientific American. It was I think it was from the 1900s, early 1900s, 1910, just around that period, around the turn of the century there. And it was interesting to see what was in there, and even up until the late 60s. I have a science encyclopedia that has definitions that have more or less disappeared from the modern dictionary. So, there's an enormous amount of adventure to be had inside the library, particularly if you start looking for these hidden gems. And as I went beyond this, I went in to start. I began to sort of think about what if inside of fiction people were writing about something real. So I started looking into this, and I began to find that a lot of fiction writers, and this is pre-1980, wrote a lot of their experiences, particularly if they were good writers. Their fiction wasn't really fiction. It was a real event that they fictionalized. So this became my sort of perspective on the library, and this is how I began sort of building my library, rather than I had already begun building it. I had a lot of National Geographic. I had some of the a whole fiction section. My library really started growing when I when I was going to university. Because one, I was buying a lot of my actual physics books, my calculus, and so on and so forth. Then I also started going out to these used bookstores and these warehouse sales, where they would have whole rows of books on sale for like $1 or something, and I'd go in there with like $100, and I'd come up with a box of books. So this is sort of my my inspiration for books. Was these warehouse sales I'd go to, and I'd pick up a lot of really interesting books. I even picked up, and this is where I sort of realized that in order to pick up books on history, you have to pick up, you have to sort of know who to look for, and it's kind of like it was what was fun for me is it was kind of like the puzzle that you had to go. In order to form a picture, you had to go out and find all the different pieces of the puzzle before you put everything together. And so this was the same thing with the library. Each book was a different piece of the puzzle, and you had to go out, pick out the books, which ones seemed interesting to you, bring them back, and then start organizing to see what you actually have. And then reading them, and to see what materials are in there, if anything is good or anything's bad, and then start ranking and the next time you go, not only have a better idea of what to look for, and you always go for what you want to look for, but you also keep your eye out and don't be stingy or ignorant of other things that you really don't necessarily know about or are unsure of the book. If something catches your eye in a book, just because it's not on your list doesn't mean you shouldn't get it. And as I started doing this, I started picking up really interesting books on. I have a lot of books now on the Cold War. This is during from 1945 to 1990, and a lot of the stuff that I have, what I found out because I began recognizing the names as these different operatives and agents. And as I started picking up and got this feel to know what to look for in terms of books on the Cold War, who was writing them, I was able to pick up a number of books about the Cold War from people who had intimate knowledge of what was going on during the Cold War. And some of the stuff I was reading in there about the Cuban crisis, I even found, and these were books written by Russians, they weren't written by Americans. I even found one of the books I have had a huge section on Harvey Oswald, the person who assassinated Kennedy, and the Kennedy assassination. Matter of fact, this is a Russian agent, a former KGB agent, who was writing about the Oswald assassination, and what he did, and this will be a little bit of a tickler that will sort of get you into the book, the new documentary series, is that what I didn't know is that people say, "Oh, Kennedy assassination must have been a CIA operation." Well, it was, because Oswald himself was a CIA agent. He was an agent. They say he was a rogue agent, but nonetheless, at the time, he was an agent. So one has to start. Now, this is where the mind starts turning. But you really have to wait and see, and start picking out more and more of the history books. And as you go out and find the stuff, you start piecing stuff together, you'll get an idea of what most likely happened during the assassination or other particular events, and you get to see a lot of different sides to things. So, this is where I think books are really amazing. I think that if you are inclined to read and you like the young adult fiction, particularly if you're reading the dystopia stuff, jump off the edge. Don't the edge is right now you're in the mainstream books. Take a little sidestep into more non-mainstream books, like go into the classics, read the women's Victorian the Victorian women's novelists. This is Jane Austen, Emily Bronte, the Bronte sisters. There's a whole group of them out there, actually. And compare the writing styles of then to now. The writing styles of the Victorian women was at such a quality that it still influences people today. So I'll leave you this, leave this for now. So I'm gonna see you guys later tonight for the news, definitely, and I'll definitely see everybody on YouTube. All right, take it easy for the rest of the day.